In 19th century Paris, artists weren't born great. They were manufactured, like products, like brands, like high-efficiency money-making machines. And if you believe that art is all about freedom, you aren't going to like this story. Frederik Hendrik Kaemmerer didn't claw his way up through poverty. He was lifted there, fast, precisely, almost like a venture capital project. But here's the question that changes everything. What is the cost of success when your name no longer belongs to you? First, you will see how talent is turned into an assembly line. Next, why his perfect women were nothing more than a beautiful lie. Then, 1871, the year he tried to escape from himself. And finally, the moment that shatters the entire narrative. Why a man at the peak of his career would choose silence over fame. The 1860s. While the world slowly rolls toward catastrophe, Kaemmerer is being taught one thing: how to paint correctly. Anatomy, chiaroscuro, the perfect form. They aren't looking for a soul here. They are learning how not to make mistakes. And that is the first trap, because art without mistakes very easily becomes lifeless. But for Kaemmerer, this isn't enough. He heads to Paris, straight into the heart of the system, to the studio of Jean-Léon Gérôme, a man who understood the most important thing. Art isn't just inspiration. It's a business. But that raises a question. How did a kid with no money even get in here? This is where the story gets more interesting than it seems. This isn't a story about talent. It's a story about a bet. 1863, The Hague. An art dealer named Jacobson looks at Kaemmerer's work, and he doesn't see an artist. He sees an opportunity. In his letters, Kaemmerer writes that dealers only buy names, not talent, not depth. A name equals money. So Jacobson decides to make a move. He invests in him, pays for half of his tuition in Paris. Effectively, he is putting money into a future brand. And you know what's most interesting? It worked. But the real point of no return happens here. Not a meeting with a muse, not a grand breakthrough, but a meeting with the company Goupil and C. This isn't a gallery. It's a factory. It was the Apple of its time. They weren't looking for geniuses. They were looking for the manageable ones. Kaemmerer was a perfect fit. The scheme was simple and ruthless. He creates a perfect painting. They produce thousands of copies. The world falls in love with his name. And that was it. The game was over before he even realized he was playing. He became famous. Fast. Too fast. But there was one detail no one noticed. While he was painting silk, ribbons, and smiles, something inside him began to vanish. Not all at once. Slowly. Almost imperceptibly. The system bought his talent. And with it, the right to explore. His first salon. A triumph. A medal. Recognition. The moment thousands of artists dream of. But this is when the most important thing happens. Standing amidst the applause, he suddenly realizes this isn't the summit. It's a cage, golden, perfect, with no way out. He believed it was already too late to change anything. Until 1871, the year empires began to crumble. And so did his illusions. Something he saw later, far from Paris, would make him look at his own paintings as something foreign, even repulsive. What exactly happened in Scheveningen, and why it became the breaking point? We will talk about that in the next part. Can art be too perfect? So perfect that it stops being alive? So perfect that there's no longer a human being left in it? In the 1870s, Paris was obsessed with Kaemmerer. His paintings weren't just being bought. They were being stamped out. Fast. Mass-produced. Without pause. Sometimes it felt like the ink hadn't even dried. Before a new contract was already signed. Because he gave the wealthy the one thing they craved most. An illusion. A world without filth. Without pain. Without cracks. Only silk. Flowers. Perfect smiles. An era that was terrified of reality. But there is one question. Did these people know where this beauty was actually born? And now stop. Imagine a seventh floor. No elevator. Narrow stairs smelling of dampness and cheap food. A cold room right under the roof. And this is where the artist lives, the man whose works are bought by the richest people in Europe. Frederik Hendrik Kaemmerer, sharing a space with another artist, Jacob Maris. One room, two lives, and a constant feeling that you are only temporary. In his letters, the same thing repeats over and over. Rooms. Just another room. And another. Dirty. Cramped. Alien. As if he is constantly living somewhere, but existing nowhere. And here is the moment you need to feel. He paints a luxury that he has never touched. He creates a world in which he does not live. Look at her. She is perfect, but her gaze is empty, glassy, as if she, too, knows that all of this is just a stage set. And here a dangerous question arises. If your art pleases everyone, does that mean it carries nothing specific? That it says nothing at all? His works become predictable. The same faces, the same poses, the same emotions. No risk, no tension, no truth. And here is the most important part. He is no longer an artist. He is part of a process. Goupil and C doesn't sell paintings. They sell stability, and Kaemmerer is their perfect instrument. And then something inside Kaemmerer begins to break. He paints his portraits and catches himself thinking. Another perfect dress, another correct smile. He already knows what the buyer will say, what the dealer will say, exactly what it's worth. And suddenly, he moves his brush and stops, as if something inside won't let him finish. Because he has already seen this painting dozens of times, and this time, he feels bored, even disgusted by the perfect world he has drawn. A medal, money, recognition, everything one needs for happiness. And at that very moment, he begins to feel sick, not metaphorically, physically, sick of these colors, sick of these faces, sick of this perfection. He feels cramped, as if he is suffocating inside his own paintings. And then he does something that makes no sense. From a business perspective, it's a catastrophe. From a human perspective, it's his only chance. He decides to destroy the brand. To find himself, he leaves Paris, away from the perfumes, away from the gold, to a place that smells of the sea. Salt, in reality. But there's a problem. The world didn't love him for the truth. The world loved him for the illusion. So what happens when he stops providing it? Is he ready to lose everything? For the sake of something he can't even explain? About the trip to Scheveningen, and the moment that will change him forever in the next part. Paris is in flames, and along with the city, the old system is burning to the ground. While empires crumble in the streets, something equally significant is happening in the world of art. Idealized beauty has stopped working. The world no longer wants perfect faces. The world craves air. The world craves life. And Kaemmerer can no longer breathe. His golden cage has suddenly become too tight. What was considered success only yesterday feels like a trap today. And he makes a sudden move. No plan, no guarantees. He drops everything. He leaves, not for the galleries, not for the clients, but to a place where there is nothing but wind, water, and light. Scheveningen, Hotel Scheveningen. And it is here that the moment happens which shatters the entire story. Kaemmerer stands by the window. Before him is the sea, gray, living, unpredictable. On the shore, there are people. They aren't perfect. The wind whips their clothes. They squint against the sun and the sand. Their movements are imperfect. They aren't beautiful, but they are real. And in that moment, something strange happens. He doesn't think about composition. He doesn't think about the client. He doesn't think about the price. For the first time in years, he simply looks, and suddenly he realizes he has never painted this, because this is unmarketable. Look at this. Where's the silk? Where are the perfect faces? They are gone. In their place, light, movement, air. Kaemmerer makes a choice. He turns to Impressionism. But this is where it gets interesting. Why Was it a rebellion, an escape, an attempt to save his own soul? Or just another calculated move? Because in Paris, they were already starting to talk about the new artists, the ones who painted feelings, not forms. Perhaps Kaemmerer simply sensed the new trend and did what he had always done. He adapted, and here lies the paradox. He becomes free. For the first time, his brushstrokes no longer obey the rules. His paintings no longer look identical. But at the same time, he begins to vanish. Before, you could look at a painting and instantly know, this is a Kaemmerer. Now, it could be anyone. He dissolves in the light, in the air, in the moment. And the question becomes a dangerous one. Did he realize that freedom could cost him his name? And the most terrifying part, from the outside, everything looks perfect. The critics are delighted. Sales are growing. The commissions never stop. But inside, an emptiness begins to grow. In his letters, fewer words. In his journals, more silence. A strange effect takes hold. The more light there is in his paintings, the darker it becomes in his life. And here is the central question of this story. Why would a man who finally became free decide a few years later that he no longer wanted to live? And what did his final award actually mean? A victory or a final defeat? The finale of this story and his last day in the Paris studio in the next part. Paris. Frederik Hendrik Kaemmerer stands at the summit. The Legion of Honor, France's highest distinction. Official recognition. The system that built him now crowns him. This is the moment people strive for their entire lives. And he achieved it. His career didn't collapse. He didn't end up in poverty. He didn't vanish. He didn't fail. Quite the opposite. He is exhibited in the finest halls. He is collected. He is respected. He did everything right. Absolutely everything. And that is exactly why this story is so chilling. Because despite all of this, you barely know his name. He didn't lose. He vanished. Not in a single moment. Not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, almost neatly, among thousands of correct artists, among beautiful but identical paintings, amidst a time that does not forgive. A lack of risk. Picture the evening of April 4th, 1902. Kaemmerer is in his studio, and here is the crucial detail. Before him stands an easel, empty. Beside it, his works, perfect, finished, sold. And for the first time in many years, he has nothing to paint, not because he lacks the ability, but because he lacks the desire, because he no longer knows what is real. The official history says he died in Paris, but in the studios, they whispered something else for a long time. That wasn't just an end. It was a choice. Let me ask you a question. Why would a man who has obtained everything decide to stop? Money? He has it. Fame? He has it. Recognition? He has it. What is missing? Perhaps. Meaning? Perhaps he realized the award wasn't for his truth. It was for his convenience. That his art didn't wound. It didn't provoke. It didn't force the world to change. It was perfect. And for that very reason, it was safe. Look at him. Is this the gaze of a man who won? Or a man who realized he was just a small pawn in someone else's grand game? In the history of art, there are those who lost everything but remained. And there are those who did everything right and vanished. Frederik Hendrik Kaemmerer never made a single mistake. And that turned out to be his greatest error. Thank you for walking through this story with me. This isn't just an artist's biography. It's a story of choice. What matters more, to be successful today or to remain authentic forever? Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think his transition to Impressionism was a sincere search for freedom or a final attempt to save himself from the role he created for himself? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this story gave you pause, leave a like. It helps stories like this live on. Subscribe. There are many more names that vanished, but shouldn't have. Art is a mirror, and sometimes it reflects things we don't want to see. Until next time,